Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Soren Brothers, the Alan and Helene Schiff Curator of Climate Change at ROM. And I'm so excited that everyone could join us for today's Curator Conversations on Climate Change, which will explore how comedy can bridge the gap between scientists and the public. Before we begin with that, I want to acknowledge that ROM sits on the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabeg Nation, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, since time immemorial to today. So today's program was actually conceived, and we came up with it when we were looking at a series of 19th century satirical prints that were created in response to a major earthquake in Edo, Japan. These first-hand accounts acted as the social media of the day, and they communicated the extent and immediate aftermath of an earthquake. In circulation for only a very short period of time, they played and continue today to play an important role as really superb, amazing examples of satire in the face of crisis. This use of satire as a method of coping with major world events prompted us to explore the use of comedy to communicate data around the greatest existential crisis in human history, which is today's climate change crisis. And that brings me to today's guest, Rollie Williams. So Rollie Williams is a comedian, climate nerd, video editor, and billiards enthusiast. He holds a degree in climate science and policy from Columbia University. Rollie Williams started Climate Town on YouTube to make climate education more digestible and humorous. He and his ragtag team of climate communicators strive to create lasting change in a way that's accessible, relevant, and above all, entertaining. So I encourage everyone in the public to submit your questions and thoughts via the Q&A feature during the program, and we will be live to answer the questions at the end. So everyone please join me in welcoming Rollie Williams.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I turned my camera on a little bit too soon. I should have waited a little bit.
I think it was good. I thought it was exactly the right time. So
awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, really excited to be here, to have you. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited for you to be here too. Big fan of your program, big fan of your show. And I have a whole bunch of really tough hardball questions for you today.
Dang,
so I hope
they're so tough. You came up with a new category called tough ball questions.
Tough ball questions.
Yeah, hardball questions
heard it here
were
first.
Not hard enough. These are tough ball questions. Both backspin and topspin at the same time. It's gonna be
what's it called? Like knuckleball questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I know. So we did have a chat a little bit, previously to this. We met each other.
It's not our first meeting, yeah.
And you mentioned that you're a fan of Jon Stewart. So I thought I would, as am I. The Daily Show was a big part of my daily life, really, at a certain point. And I wanted to start just with that thought and thinking about climate change and comedy and how these things tie together, and taking really serious topics into the world of climate. I sometimes felt like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and these comedians, like what the secret power of what they're doing is that they're able to talk about things that might be kind of censored otherwise too. Like you can go further as a comedian in saying things that maybe people wouldn't let you say otherwise, because you can always just sort of back out and say, well, I'm not a news reporter, I'm not this or that, I'm just a comedian making a joke. And there's kind of a veil that lets you go behind. Like, do you feel like that fits with also, your understanding of them or yourself? Or
yeah, I think it's less of a like, if you get caught, you can always like back into this little pocket of like, no, don't blame me, I'm only a comedian, like I think it's more that these are just like, I don't know, they're tough, uncharismatic things to like bring up on television or radio or whatever. Like it just sometimes people like, oh, I had a hard day, I worked 9 to 5, okay, gonna switch on the TV and I just want to relax. And like, then you get hit with like, did you know that you're murdering a polar bear because they're starving to death? And it's like, no, I've just changed the channel, I think
it's more the sugar coating on the pill of trying.
Yeah. Or you're like, like even like greasing the wheels or something. It just like allows people to get themselves to the emotional state where they're willing to like digest the information a little bit better. That, at least that's like how it always was for me when I would like watch Jon Stewart talk about tax reform, and I'd be like, God, this is so boring. But like he would do it in a way that just got me interested, and I think some momentum was required.
I mean, I feel
Can we
like
swear on
John,
this thing, by the way? Soren, are we allowed to swear or no?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure Erin has like a bleep, a real-time bleeping power, but I don't know.
I'm positive that she does not have that. That's not in the budget.
Yeah,
I
so I
just
mean,
won't swear. I can just
yeah,
not swear. I'll just won't. Yeah, I won't do it.
that might be easier. I'm not sure, but I mean, it's international.
Got it.
um,
Okay.
yeah, so I mean, who knows? It's like international waters, there's no laws.
It's very different to say it's international, but it's also international waters, because that, like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever. I'll keep it under.
All right. Okay. That's safe, I guess. But yes, I mean, I remember there was a point where like most, maybe it was Americans in the polls, but most people were getting their news from comedy, which I remember thinking was kind of exciting, but sort of scary too, where it's like, is news that bad that we can't actually just face it and see someone telling it straight, and we have to have it like hidden in a joke? Do you think it's like a good sign that comedy has become the main way that we want to digest like the scariest information around us, or is it just natural?
I guess it just maybe the like balance of information feels a little scarier now, or maybe like, in order for a news program to be to get the ratings, get the clicks, it's got to be a little shocking, and part and parcel to like more difficult to digest content is like, oh, we gotta spice it up with a little joke here and a little goofball there. Yeah, I don't know. I think I always like imagine somebody who watches a news program to be like a very serious like uncle or something, and like
Mhm.
if you're just gonna sit down, you're like, I want no jokes. I want like, like the I want like Walter Cronkite to like just give it to me straight. It sort of implies that you're like, oh, I'm a serious person, and I think the era of this serious person is a little bit over, because it turns
Mhm.
out like it's a pretty absurd world that everybody lives in, and even if it's like horribly depressing and tragic, I think there's a certain irony to that like just being a one-dimensional person who's like, go to work, go home, feed the, like it just sort of feels like that's a caricature of what
Mhm.
a child thinks an adult is. And I think we've just sort of, as a world, we've sort of moved beyond into a little more nuance. And I think nuance, a little more like modulated, serious slash comedy, drama slash, you know, pop. Like these are things that exist simultaneously, and we want to see them exist simultaneously in the news as well.
Yeah, maybe it's just like becoming more comfortable in our skins as a society too. Like you think about even, I mentioned like the Edo Japanese prince. It's like not like a new thing to be able to laugh at disasters and to, and our responses to them. But it's like, yeah, I just thought of that connection now. It's like, this is just maybe pendulum swinging of societies, how seriously we take ourselves versus how open we are to laughing about stuff too.
I think so. I think like anytime you're a society that's born out of like a world war, you tend to think of yourselves as a little more serious than maybe other like generations. So I think
Yeah.
maybe like the generation that is marinated in that seriousness, that is a Nazi takeover, like a perspective globe ruled by
Mhm.
Nazis, like that can put a little fear of God in you and make you a little more serious. And maybe we're
Mhm.
kind of forgetting that past a little more. I don't know,
Yeah.
man. Is any of this making sense? Are
I know.
people enjoying this, or are they like, this dude sucks? I can't tell.
We can't see them. That's the beauty of it. We don't know.
Oof.
We'll find out
Okay,
later.
well,
We'll see
if
the
you're in the
Q&A. They
comment
might, yeah.
section, yeah, maybe I will.
um, but yeah, I mean, on that note, I feel like within climate change specifically, sometimes there's an extra level of seriousness. Like had um, I've had people who I feel like almost like to talk about climate change comedy seems like an offensive thing to talk about. Like I even had an experience recently where I was at a local summit, an event, and I was talking with a local climate change artist, and then we started joking about putting in an art grant to travel around the world doing this kind of climate study, but it's like just burning so many fossil fuels, like kind of recording the dawn chorus biodiversity and stuff 24/7. And we were laughing, and then someone came up and was like, I'm really shocked to hear these, hear us laughing, as if it was, we were at like at a religious event or like a funeral or something. Like, you shouldn't be laughing about climate change. And I think for us, it was kind of like a coping thing to people who devote themselves to climate, extricating society from climate crisis. But have you ever had people criticize you as being like bringing comedy to climate change? Or?
If I ever meet that person, I'm gonna just really try to get inside their head. Like, all I want to know is why that person feels that they have the right to tell you how to respond to something. It is hysterical to me that they effectively have exerted their ownership over the global climate crisis and like are now the arbiter. I don't know. It seems dumb to me. I hope that's a hypothetical situation you made up to ask the question, because if it's not,
it was a friend of mine, separately, who came and was acting funny, but it wasn't, nothing against him, and he wasn't like criticizing us, but you could see he was surprised and like thrown off that we would be laughing about it, that we would be laughing at all.
All right, so he wasn't like, you guys stop that right now. He was like, no. What's going on? Like, I want to understand. Like, okay, all right, I like him again. I'm sorry, I really turned on him. I didn't have all the information.
No, that's a critical piece.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't had an experience where somebody has asked me like, "How dare you?" or something, and I think it's because I don't know, like they probably wouldn't watch the whole video. They'd drop out early and kind of bail out. But I think it also it's clear. It would be clear to an observer that like I'm not just dabbling in. I didn't just like pull up the Wikipedia page and like search the first thing about climate change. Like I got to. I almost swore, Soren. Oh boy, I almost did it. Okay, I won't though, I promise. I got a GD, a freaking gosh darn degree in climate science and policy. Like I spent $70,000 of my own money to learn about this thing. Like I'm not, and I think that potentially might help offset somebody thinking I was just some sort of like drive-by rubbernecker, like laughing at a tragedy.
Like you're clearly taking it seriously, as we are by talking about it here too. On that note, with your show, I don't know, I'm assuming that everyone here has seen all the episodes as I have.
That's a heck of an assumption to make, Soren. I think, but if anyone has even seen one episode, thank you very much. Thank you for your service. I'm sorry forever. I appreciate you watching.
If you haven't seen them all, I recommend you do. And I also, through watching your programs, I found out about another one called Not Just Bikes. Which also features Toronto pretty prominently, and I've been now diving pretty deep into that. I was wondering if you had any suggestions, also just in terms of good programs or particularly bad cases of climate comedy, if you ever come across as a comedian or as a climate change communicator. You would share.
I have I think it is nice that it seems to be pretty fresh powder. Like there's not a lot of tracks made in it, and there's not a lot of people who are like getting really into it, because it's just not like, it's not an obvious thing to try to like dig into and make a lot of jokes about. I think there's some good ones. There's a TikToker I think is really talented. Her name is Hazel, or their name is Hazel, and they go by at Economy Mommy on TikTok. And I know that sounds weird, but they're really funny. I promise. They're really good. There's this guy named Brad Einstein, real name. Famously, his first name would beat up his last name. Chuck Nice is a good climate comedian. There's a bunch more. Nicole Conlon, she's out here, she's writing comedy all the time. She goes by I think at Nicole Conlon on Twitter. She's out on Twitter. There's a lot of them running around out there. We're hoping maybe one day we'll all unite under one banner and really give them the what for.
Out of the water.
In terms of bad comedy, every once in a while I'll see it, but it mostly comes from just like a misunderstanding of the physics of climate change, or like the political climate around climate change, where where they take a swing that is under researched and over confident, and it just like it kind of thuds for me personally, because I'm like, well, that's not really true. Like, what do you know, like, why go to the trouble of like taking the time to write a joke that it's just like has a huge weird gaping flaw in the opening premise. But I don't, like, I think it's mostly it's a pretty young field.
So, I mean, I think that could be a good segue to something I warned you when we met in advance, that I did write a climate change joke.
Oh yeah.
That I wanted to share with you.
This is the equivalent of a tough ball question. It's like you're gonna hit me with the joke, and I'm gonna give you my honest reaction. I'll put my face as close to the screen as possible. Yeah, you're gonna really see it.
And for everyone who's watching to know, Rollie did ask me to tell the joke in advance, and I refused. So this is honestly the first time that Rollie's hearing this. And I wrote 4 climate change jokes, but I think one of them is only even like, I went through with my wife and she's like, no, this is the only one you should tell if you're going to tell.
Okay, so this is already the top 75th percentile. Okay.
And it's not good. I am not a comedian, so that's
okay. So what you're doing right now, this is eroding the credibility that your joke has. You just gotta let it rip.
It's an amazing joke. You're gonna love it.
Thank you. Don't do that either.
Why do so many people want? Okay, no, here it comes. Here it is. Why do so many people want to date climate change scientists?
Why?
Because they're into modeling.
Okay. All right. Okay.
It has.
B. I'll give it a B.
A B. Okay. That's. I'll take that as a huge honor from a comedian, from a professional comedian.
Of course. Yeah. I am taking into account both the run up where you were like, "This is not very good," but also that you delivered it with a lot of confidence, and I think that really helped it.
Okay, it's good to know. Yeah, the other ones, some of them have more.
Give me the worst one. I want to hear the one that your wife was like, "Do not say that joke." That's what I want to hear.
Why did the chicken cross the road?
Why? Sea
level rise.
Ooh, okay, a little gallows humor. I actually I felt like that might be the punchline, but only because I knew the category of joke.
I don't know if that's actually the worst one. That was, but that was another one there that at least it's the shortest. So I felt like that would be like a Band-Aid coming off. But it is hard. I mean, I put a lot of thought into these, and but I mean, I think part of it is the focus of the humor. Like your focus on your humor is not on climate change itself, or like the effects of climate change. Like you're not laughing about sea level rise. You're laughing. You're talking about, like, you're basically laughing at the ridiculous situation that we are putting ourselves in a lot of the cases, and like our politics, like our political choices, and like the things that our institutions are doing, which I find is like, part of like what I'm trying to focus on too as a climate change communicator is like more on the solutions and the causes rather than necessarily just going into the environmental science aspect. Yeah,
I think there's something, and this is why I think I like Jon Stewart so much, is like he like the for him, like he would always like write the jokes through the material, where like he is just a funny dude and he is conveying information, but like finding the mirth within the information. I think that's so funny. And like, just it's like when you listen to, like, when you're like a friend who's like a really good storyteller, and like you're a little drunk and everyone's like having a good time and they're like kind of going off on tangents and like doing impressions. It's just like, oh, this is fun. Like I'm enjoying the way this like raconteur is raconteuring, and I think that's like a real strength that Jon Stewart has for real. So it's not so much like telling knock jokes, like it's like the comedy's always organic and always like kind of performative in a sort of a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, lining up jokes, it's probably, it's one of those things where once it's clear that you've lined up a joke, as I made as abundantly clear as possible, then it's over. Like there's not even, I should have just stopped before going through with it.
It certainly, I don't know, but it like, I'm gonna raise the joke now to a B+. I'm giving it a B+ now that I've like had some distance from it. I think it's like it hits all the right boxes.
I'll take it.
I think the ideal audience is like climate students, So, like you can tour college campuses with that joke probably.
The first joke, the better joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The second joke, I think that's for more like a late night bar kind of scene.
yeah.
You could also do
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
I wrote a follow-up joke. Okay. Why did the chicken cross the road?
Why?
Because this city has a long since abandoned pedestrian infrastructure, and everything is so car centric that there was no way for him to get to the other side without first putting his life on the line.
I like it. Yeah, yeah.
You don't have
Or we
to. You
could.
don't have to pretend that you liked it, but there's something that like. I think
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
working around it.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
had a light
meta.
bulb joke in there too, and I was like, no, this is not. Yeah, but it's yeah, it's tricky to get to work with the preformed ones. But I mean, I think you did just what you said should be done, like coming up organically and out of the conversation. So, I mean, I
Thanks,
would
man.
give it an A, but I'm biased.
You
And
would give it an A? Wow, you're generous. I appreciate that.
um, on that note, kind of, uh, I feel like there's a deep sort of intuitive sense sometimes of like pessimism with this kind of comedy, of like
Mm.
being like, we're laughing, like it's a darkness to the comedy, to a lot of like, say, like Jon Stewart's, and like things are bad and like let's laugh about how bad it is and share that. Do you consider yourself a pessimist versus an optimist, or do you think it's important that people identify one way or the other, or do you try to sway people?
I don't think so. I don't think it like unless it's like in some way actionable. I don't think it really serves you to like. I think maybe in the same way that like you can't give yourself a nickname. Like
Mhm.
I think it doesn't. Being labeling yourself as a pessimist or an optimist is sort of like trying to get out in front of something. I certainly like if you're like, oh, I bet everything's gonna totally blow it and we're never gonna solve like the climate
Mhm.
crisis. It's like, okay, so how does that change how you're gonna act every day?
Mhm.
And if it's like, oh, I'm gonna be like a little worse of a person, probably not a helpful, like
Mhm. Yeah.
cape to wear every morning.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've had the same thing. I mean, I've had people several times, I feel, sort of label me automatically as an optimist if I talk about solutions at all. And it's like,
Mm.
it's funny, it becomes one of these things where it's like just talking about things that are happening. It's like, this doesn't mean that I necessarily am optimistic. I mean, optimism is like it's like a personality trait. The same glass is half full or half empty. But it's
Mm.
like, you're just looking at a realistic situation. I think like, there's cause for hope. But it's funny how bring that in. It's like, I feel like people are really quick to jump to conclusions sometimes about um, what you're trying to get through with climate change, which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's really interesting. I never thought about it that way. Like that there are. I think there's sort of a preformed concept that like either everything is screwed or it's not. And I suppose like in a very literal sense, like something will happen. Like
Mhm.
the future will come and meet us, whether it's like like whether we stumble into it and kind of succumb to some pretty damaging climate-y effects, or we like mitigate some disasters, or a giant meteor like destroys
Mhm.
the East Coast or something. Like the future will happen. There is a correct answer in the future. So like being an optimist or a pessimist, you're sort of like if there was like Vegas odds on like if you were trying to win a bunch of money by betting the right way, maybe that would be. It's just like it's like not important to me to be right about whether or not we do well in the future, because it's like that's going to be governed by what we do. So
Mhm.
like optimism, pessimism, it's like it doesn't make sense as a concept to me about like to describe the climate crisis.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that I mean, there's so much push and pull with the way people talk about it. I agree, and it's kind of funny to see the categorizations that come in. Um,
Yeah.
Another thing that we talked about before we had this conversation, uh, I think you mentioned that you were really interested in finding ways to take this sort of big issue of climate change and like bring it in, like breaking it into like manageable portions for as a climate communicator. And it reminded me, I was thinking about it afterwards, of a climate change scientist from India, actually, that I met a while ago, Rowan Arthur. And he'd been working in Lakshadweep archipelago, this group of islands in the Indian Ocean. And he was saying that like, he'd done a bunch of interviews with people there. And it's like, you talk about climate change, and this is arguably one of the most vulnerable places. It's like economically impoverished and low-lying, islands dealing with like coral bleaching, all this stuff. And he said, you talk about climate change, and local people he would interview in the villages there were kind of like, but glaze over. They didn't want to talk about climate change. Like that's the thing that people in like New York think about, or it's like a global thing that has nothing to do with us. But you talk about like water, and they're like, oh yeah, like all our freshwater supplies have become salty, and they've had to introduce these like desalinization kind of schemes and doing things to change their water. And as like making it intensely local and talking about the changes that they were experiencing became sort of necessary. And then you could start tying climate change into that. But it's like, as a global phenomenon, it was like, it was a non-starter. And so I've been thinking a lot about like how you start the local conversations to make it make sense for people here as well. And because it's a local thing that every person at every location of the planet is feeling differently and is having different responses to. Do you feel like in what you do, like I noticed, like, I mean, Just for Bikes, I mentioned them again, they often focus on like specifics. I'm sorry, yeah.
If you're looking at
just for laughs,
bikes,
not
I
just
don't
bikes.
think that's a thing.
Yeah, not just bikes. But yeah, or is it no bikes? I don't know. Yeah,
ain't no bikes. That's in Texas.
Ain't no bikes.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, he like focuses on specific cities and specific neighborhoods, and I feel like yours is like kind of general themes that you focus on. That it might be like suburbia or other. But do you have sort of local audiences, or is it like Americans in general that you think about as a communicator? Or
that's a great idea. I also like, so I'm currently in New York, and so the concept that like only New Yorkers think about it as like I don't think that's wrong. I think there's like, I think anytime you're saying climate change, it's like saying I love sports. It's like which one?
Mhm.
Oh, a basketball. Okay, well, which I love the Chicago Bulls. Like it wouldn't work. It doesn't translate unless you like actually get a little granular. And I think it's the same thing with climate change. But I don't like have a specific audience in mind for the videos. I think most videos come out of the idea of like, I'll be reading something, or one of the people that I work with will be like, oh, hey, I got this article, or I heard this, or have you heard this thing? And like, we'll find a mind-blowing like stat or some like big, oh my God, did you know that like 90% of plastic isn't recycled? Or did you know that like the plastic recycling symbol was created by the plastics industry to trick people into thinking that their plastic was being recycled as a way to like make people okay with throwing plastic away, like recycling it, but really, and like that is like, oh my God, I think as many people as I can tell, I think that's like a good piece of information to like talk about. So like it kind of backs up from like, I'm like, what? Like this sort of moment where you're like, how is this true? Then you like research and like, it is true, and it's true because of this thing and this thing. And so then we kind of like try to make as interesting of a piece about that as possible. And then put it out. So like it's really not aimed at any specific group. As much as it is like more people need to like be talking about this at a party, for instance.
Do you feel like there's also a difference between how people respond to your videos? If you have something that's like, say, like even like you were talking about things that are like individual choices that people can make, like recycling plastics or having to buy less clothing, or you should buy less clothing and do this, or did you get more kind of pushback or negative response versus if you have a video about Supreme Court decisions or things that have nothing to do with people's individual behaviors? Or is it the same kind of response and comments?
Like in the same way that like if someone can take something personally, they probably will. And I think the easier something is to take personally, the more comments that I'll get that are just sort of like hurt comments, like knee jerk I'm mad at this video sorts of comments. But no, I mean, like, to be totally honest, like, we don't get a ton of negative comments, which is kind of shocking. I think it's mostly because they're just like long videos that are really in the weeds on certain topics, and like in order to get mad about it, you'd have to spend your time watching the whole thing, and like I think it's just easier to give up and just like move on. But like other comment, like we did a video about like how the suburbs like just don't pencil out like economically, like the suburbs are subsidized by cities. And people are like, no, the reason why people live here is they like living here, you know, and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
people
so
love that
you're
message,
just
yeah.
offended. Like you don't have an argument other than like, I feel hurt. And that, I mean, I shouldn't take it as a compliment, but I do. Like if somebody has no argument, no logic, just like a gut shot, I am hurt, and so I want to hurt you. I'm like, oh, so it got to you. Like now you're going to be like thinking about this. And I think that's like a positive thing.
Yeah, I can see that too. And I just realized that the half hour has flown by very
Oh my
quickly.
God, I'm sorry.
This last time. No, it was great. But I do want to leave some time for public Q&A. So on behalf of the ROM
Public
audience,
comments. Yeah, burn me to the ground.
let's now see where it goes. So yeah, we do have a few. So first of all, yeah, thank you so much for joining us again. This is a really exciting conversation. But yeah, we have a few minutes. Yeah, let's definitely do it again sometime. As a reminder to the audience too, you can forward your questions through the Q&A button on the screen. And I'm not sure if there are any questions.
I saw a big red dot over the Q&A for a while. So I think maybe there was a dismissed open.
There was anonymous basically saying, I find it refreshing to allow ourselves to cope with the profound bombing of negativity news via humor. So I agree with that. That's a positive.
I agree too.
And everyone's like, what do you ask a comedian? This is what I've been asking myself for days. I mean, I can always.
I mean, I don't know. I don't exactly know where the hesitation is coming from. If it's from a place of like, not, I don't know. If it's coming from a place of like, you think I'm gonna like roast you or something. I fully will not roast anybody. I don't have those sorts of. I'm not a New York insult comic or anything.
Is there anything you won't joke about?
I don't know. I mean, like, probably, I don't know what it is. I probably, like, you know, there's a lot of issues that, like, I would feel very uncomfortable, like, taking on the topic as somebody who maybe couldn't experience them firsthand. You know, like, I probably wouldn't do, like, a video where I felt like somebody else, some other narrator or host would be a much more obvious choice. But I, you know, like in terms of like, is there some sort of taboo subject that's just like a recipe for somebody to be like, well, I'm gonna go do a terrible 5 minutes in some basement like open mic just to prove that I can joke about, you know, suicide or something. It's just like I don't know, not something I'm super interested in.
All right, they're pouring in now. Could you talk about your education background and how you've made the bridge to comedy?
Sure. Yeah. I got a degree in biochemistry. And then I immediately got into, I did like comedy every night in Denver, and then I moved to New York to pursue comedy. I took classes at the UCB and the Annoyance Theater. And I just like was really, really doing a lot of terrible comedy for a long time that thank God nobody ever had to see, and it wasn't recorded or anything. But like just garbage. So I got a lot of reps in New York, and then I started a show called An Inconvenient Talk Show, where I played like a strung out Al Gore kind of character, and I would bring on real climate scientists as sort of as a joke to like talk to them as Al Gore. And then it became like, oh, it's a running monthly show. And then I realized like, oh, I need to know more about this. So I went and got a degree from Columbia. And that is how I kind of bridged the gap.
Nice. And do you find that your jokes have to be constantly updated due to the increasing research?
Yeah, I sort of, I don't have like a shtick. I don't like go touring like with a tight 20-minute set or anything. So like I put a video out and then it's done. I can't go back in and edit it or anything. So I don't like, certainly like if I could go back and edit videos and update them, I would do that. But you know, like luckily the medium that I'm trafficking in is stationary. Like you finish a piece, you put it out, and then it's out, you know.
Nice. And is there a formula to balance the seriousness of the issues while you give it a comedy spin?
I think what I've learned is that you need to just like really, really read up on the topic. So like, you know, multiple weeks of pretty hard research, you know, like getting all the articles you can, talking to experts, and really like trying to formulate as close to the as accurate a narrative as possible. Like really do your due diligence to like nail it. And then I think the comedy comes from knowing where the weird moments are within the narrative, and that comes from just like knowing all the stats and facts, and then finding the funny jokes within the stats. So for instance, when we were going to like pull a piece of media and it's like it was a rap from 1993 or whatever, and it's like, oh, this rap is it sucks. Like these are a bunch of like child actors doing a rap, and there's like a lot of mileage you can get out of like kind of analyzing what they must have been thinking when they're like, oh my god, we're nailing this, we're like gonna definitely release this video. So like there's kind of getting into the heads of people back then. I think there's a lot of comedy there, but it mostly comes from not being wrong about stuff, and then trying to just maintain the accuracy as hard as possible.
I mean, I love that even when we were meeting previously to this, you mentioned like I was kind of referring to a previous video you did, I think about the carbon footprint, and you were like already kind of fact checking yourself and like, oh, like this would be something I would tweak slightly differently. And I think even in your videos, I've seen that coming up where sometimes you have a little asterisk pop up, and it's done in a humorous way, but it's like the integrity of like making sure that you have the good message, like the actual facts. I think it's really nice to see that coming through. That's also kind of a breath of fresh air from, again, like the news as you usually see it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think you know, credibility is I only have credibility. So like if I like can't be wrong about something and admit it, then like I think that just like really betrays a sense of inability to like reckon with facts as they come up and change. And I think if nothing else, everyone ought to be more willing to like be wrong about stuff and admit it and move on.
Will be a better place.
I'm seeing some webinar chat questions that are not in the Q&A. Are these people being?
I've been looking at those too.
Oh, you got them. Okay.
I mean, we're getting close to the end, but maybe we can end up with. I
just saw one or two pop up. One was like, "What video are you most proud of?" And I think that is going to be, I guess maybe the first video. I think like we've done a lot better job over the years, but I think doing the very first video was like kind of a fun experience in like how much can I make my girlfriend to come out to the park to like film me messing up a take enough times before she's like, I have to go, I need to leave. I don't know, there was something fun about like just trying to develop a voice and a style that I think was kind of mostly there in the first video.
Nice. And then maybe we can close off on the last comment here on the webinar chat, which is, please tell us your favorite joke or jokes.
Oh my God. Okay. Like,
the pressure's on.
Here's my favorite joke. Here's my favorite joke that I've ever heard in my life. Number one. Okay. Why does everyone want to date climate scientists?
I knew it. Why?
Because they're into modeling, maybe.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I appreciate it. And great to meet you. Great to see you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Let me know if I need to send an apology letter to anybody in the comments, and I'm happy to be on at any time.
I will let you know. Perfect.
Right.
Take care. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Have a good one.